We still have a few people joining us. We're going to give it another minute or so just to let those people join us and get into our room. We will be starting soon. If you haven't added your name and your institution to our chat box, if you would please do that, we would greatly appreciate it. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on what part of the country you're in. We'd like to welcome everyone to our ESP Professional Development webinar. Thank you for joining us today. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our ESP Professional Development webinar series starting back. My name is Tyrone Gentry, and I currently serve as the chair of the Professional Development Committee. Please take a moment to drop your name and your institution in the chat box so that we know who is with us today. We're happy to see that many of our ESP members could take advantage of this free webinar. It's a great benefit of our membership. The webinar is being recorded and will be posted to the archives on the National Association website, along with the other webinars that are accessible to all of our members. All the participants are on mute during the presentation. However, you may use the question box to ask questions or make statements during the webinar. There will be a few minutes at the end of the webinar for our presenter to answer some questions. Following the webinar, you may receive an email link with a survey, but you will receive a link to our recorded presentation for you to review or view again later. Thank you for joining us today. Now to introduce our presenters for today. Andrea Bravo and Lendel Narine are from the Utah, Iowa chapter. And today, the title of their presentation is Understanding the Needs and Priorities of Elected Officials in Relation to Extension. Extension relies on the support from and the partnerships of the counties in which they work. Surveying the elected officials is instrumental in understanding those needs and creating a mechanism for conversations around priorities and alignment. I now welcome Andrea and Lendel to walk us through their methodology and the results of their study, providing us some tools that we can implement this in our own states. Andrea and Lendel, the show's yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tyrone. We're really excited to be here today and to share the information on the study that Lendel and I did a couple of years ago, but it is still definitely relevant. And we hope that we're able to share some good information and tools with you today, and then have some great discussion on how you may take the work that we've done and implement it back in your state. So I am going to click to the next slide and make sure that we work here. Perfect. Did that change? Lendel, are we good? Are we on the name slide? Perfect. Okay. So I just wanted to introduce who we are quickly. Lendel, Dr. Narine Lendel, and I work very closely together on many, many projects. He is an associate professor and our evaluation specialist for our extension system. And he has a vast amount of knowledge on evaluation and is a really great thinker kind of for all things strategic needs and planning. My role is slightly different in our USU system and maybe different from some of our other states that are present here. I am a faculty member. I'm the county director for our Salt Lake County Extension Office, but then I have a statewide administrative role where I am the director for county operations statewide. And that means I work with all of our county offices to help them kind of with whatever they need, whether that is working on their budgets or their relationships with their elected officials or office HR management or kind of special projects. But it really gives me the opportunity to see needs or see opportunities and dig into those. And Lendel and I often do those things together. Lendel, did you want to add anything as far as your introduction?
Well, just to add a little more to what Andrea said, I'm the evaluation specialist at USU Extension. Across the state, we only have one evaluation specialist, but Andrea and I work together a lot on anything related to impact, strategic planning, and professional development. So we work a lot to help our faculty develop the capacity that they need to evaluate their programs, in addition to other things that would support them in their roles. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So I like to think Lendel's really the brains of the operation, and I'm the person that just likes to talk and do the presenting. So we actually work really well together. Our plan for the presentation is we'll share some of the background, some of the why of why we chose to do this. And Lendel then will present the objectives and the methods and some of the results, and I'll share some of those as well. And then we'll have plenty of time for discussion. So like Tyrone said, if you have questions during, feel free to throw them in the chat, but we'll also have time at the end. Okay. So I started with Extension in this role in 2015, and I came from the nonprofit world. I ran a small statewide nonprofit, and one of my first tasks was to provide a presentation to the Salt Lake County Council that was kind of in conjunction with our budget request. And I had worked in Extension before, but I was brand new to this role, and I'm like, okay, how do I do this, and what do I need to tell them? And as I gathered information from people in my county, I realized that most of the time we say, oh yeah, we're USU Extension, you know who we are, and then we dive right in to what we do, whether it's horticulture, whether it's 4-H, whether it's family consumer science. And we don't always do a very good job of telling the story of why we do things on a larger level and how we integrate. And so I was trying to start to pull that together, in a broader way. And then I started thinking, gosh, why do they fund us? Especially in an urban county like Salt Lake County is. I'm saying, okay, I'm asking for money for 4-H, but we have a youth services program that provides programming and resources to kids. We have our horticulture and master gardener program, and we're asking for funding for that. But here in Salt Lake County, we have open space programs and many nonprofit partners who are already funding us, who the county is already funding. We're asking for family consumer science program funding, and we do a lot of work with mental health and relationship programming and substance abuse programming here in Salt Lake. But we have a health department that does this. So why are they funding us? And it really, straight from the beginning, I said, wow, we need to make sure that we're almost kind of doing our social marketing or development of these folks as funders. We need to make sure that we understand what they're looking for and their needs, and that we're aligning our programs to those things, but also differentiating ourselves from others through our impact so that we can show why they should fund us, why we're important, and why, why we have such a contribution to our communities. So as I look at that, and then I take on this statewide role, I'm looking at Utah, and I wanted to share this because I know we're definitely different than many of our friends back east. We are a large state with relatively few counties. So we have 29 counties in Extension. There's 30 offices because one of our counties has 2. We have a few garden centers and some small business development centers. There's 85-ish county faculty and 50 campus faculty. But with our large and rural counties, we really have to make sure that we have a strong relationship with our county commissioners or county council members as we're providing programming in these areas. When I started working on my statewide role and I started meeting with more commissioners and council members, our elected officials, I started seeing that we have, in some areas, we're seeing a change in the demographics of the makeup of our elected officials. And this may be happening in some of your communities too. So for a long time, many of our commissioners, especially in our rural counties, they'd been there for a long time. It's a small place. They knew Extension, they knew our county agents, and they knew them as the resource that they went to when they had any issues, especially in agriculture, right? Many of them, as I talk to them, they say, oh, we love Extension. I know Extension. I grew up on a dairy farm, or my father grows wheat, and I work really closely. We've always worked really closely with our county agent. When I started talking to some of our more urban counties, it was definitely changing. And many of them said, what is extension? What does extension do? Why do we fund you? Why are you important? They didn't necessarily grow up on a farm or grandpa's farm that they visited during the summer. They didn't necessarily participate in 4-H. And it was a different conversation with those counties than with some of our rural counties. So we had to pay attention to that and say, gosh, we need to do a better job of marketing ourselves and showing our relevance. Our overall goal in Utah is to improve the quality of life for Utahns. So we have to have impact in order to stay relevant and to be successful in our work. So I said, why do they fund us and why is this important? This is a slide I put together a few years ago for our Utah Association of Counties meeting. And I use this often when I'm talking to counties about the importance of the work we do and their role and why we need them. This is really just showing kind of the return on investment. This is statewide, and it's a few years ago, but the 14 to 15% that the county puts in to help fund our programs is matched by all of the other funding here. So, the university puts in about 57%. Outside awards, these are grants and other funds that our faculty members are bringing in to Utah communities, about 22%. And then there's federal funding that supports extension as well. So I always like to talk to them about the return on investment. Now you could say this might go the opposite way, right? Where they say, well, we're only contributing 14%. Why do you need that? And can we pull that funding? But we always make sure that they understand that this is the funding that supports our staff, that supports the programs, that supports the things that we are really not able to fund through grants and other outside sources. This pie chart also doesn't include facilities costs and our offices and some of those benefits that we get by being with the county and in county buildings. So we really need counties. We need that 14% in Utah. We need those partnerships, or we would be in a pretty challenging state in order to be able to do our jobs. So as we were thinking about it, Lendel and I said, okay, we need to do a better job of really understanding what they want so we can speak to what they want. So for the next couple slides, I'm going to turn the time over to Lendel to share the study that we designed and the results from it.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. So what we do every 4 years, starting 2019, we conduct a statewide needs assessment. So we have a good idea of what are the emergent issues and the needs affecting residents in Utah. And in understanding that, we still have to be able to respond to the request by our council members. So we have to kind of balance what the public generally wants from us, which is to have an impact on those emergent issues, those persistent needs, and also try to balance that with what county commissioners think we should be doing. Because at the same time, we need to respond to both group of stakeholders, and we wanted to ensure that those things were consistent. It should be that the opinions or the public perception of the needs and issues affecting them, it's reflective of what the county commissioners thinks that their needs are. So this study came about as a result of that statewide needs assessment, just to understand, are those issues aligned? County commissioners, the public, and where does extension is fit in that equation, and how can extension justify its ability to address those issues? So I'll add a link to the statewide needs assessment so you all can get a better idea of what it looks like. But all of the issues that we examined in the county commissioner's assessment was the same issues that we examined in the statewide needs assessment. That way, we were able to align the issues that both parties think were important. So for this study, we focus exclusively on county commissioners. In their opinion, what are the most urgent issues affecting the public? We also wanted to get an idea of their perceptions towards extension, because we know that these group of people constantly change. And the traditional view of extension, which we've talked about forever in terms of that agrarian view that extension is the agricultural office, we can't expect that to remain as it is, right? So we wanted to understand what they thought about extension. And together with that, what are the level of familiarity with extension? So it's important that as county commissioners change, as they transition on and off that group, a lot of people are not aware of extension. And it's something that we need to be aware of, because we can't expect them to fund us the amount of money that they give us without knowing what we do. And if you go to a lot of counties and you ask them what extension, they would respond with, well, that's the agricultural office. And that's different to what we do. As Andrea said, we're involved in so many different things that already overlap with the existing departments in those counties. So the question would always arise, why should they fund extension when they're already doing it? So that's where we need to be able to position ourselves. So we looked at perceptions, familiarity, and also the kind of information that they want from us. So we have to understand that evaluation could provide a host of different type of data, but there are certain things that county commissioners might be able to use that would help them more than others, right? So we want to understand what are the kind of things that they're looking for. Is it return on investments? Is it health and benefit? Is it all those things? So those were the objective of this study. Andrea? Before continue, I'm just adding the link to our statewide needs assessment in the chat. So in this study, we used a quantitative design. Quantitative with a qualitative is follow-up, but we'd focus more on the quantitative here, and Andrea would dive a bit into the qualitative. So it's more like a explanatory kind of study. The data was collected in 2021 at the beginning of COVID. So it was a while ago, but at the same time, I think it aligns to our most recent statewide needs assessment. So it's still relevant in the sense that their perceptions are somewhat similar to what the public thinks extension should be focusing on. In total, we have 109 county commissioners and council members in Utah. And because we formed a group of people at Extension that have close connections with those council members, we're able to get 28 out of 29 counties represented in our sample. So we had a response rate, a 66% response rate, which resulted in 72 responses. So we had a very good sample because of the group of people who worked on this. Some of them were county commissioners themselves, right? I think some of them were commissioners, and some of them were involved in the different political organizations. So they were able to help us collect a good sample from the population. We mostly did descriptive analysis with non-parametric procedures because all of our variables were ordinal Likert type items. So we were able to rank those from the non-parametric test. I think we used the Wilcoxon test rank different things in here. And then we did a qualitative follow-up to the people who said that they're willing to speak with us more after answering the survey. So all in all, we had a good representation. We tried to get us as census. We ended up with 66%. So it's not a random sampling, but it's most of the entire population of county commissioners that are represented in the sample, and the basic descriptive statistics to keep this as straightforward as possible. So just looking at the critical issues and the needs that they think extension should be focusing on, we decided to just put the top 10 here. But these are the issues that county commissioners think USU extension should spend a lot of time on. So these are the things that are critical to them. And from this, you can see that a lot of them still think about extension as an agricultural organization, because the top two items, assisting farmers and agricultural profitability, and then preserving agricultural farmland. So a lot of them still associate extension with agriculture. And then a big issue in our state, regardless of what county you're in, is protecting water quality. So that was consistent, and that is still relevant today. And then we have the things like 4-H, which is developing youth leadership. Again, extension was always associated with 4-H. It's the youth development branch of extension. And then you have, again, agriculture, which is local food system. But then we have other things that we see are becoming more relevant in our states. Youth mental health continues to be one of the biggest items we see across all our assessments. All our youth needs assessments, our statewide needs assessment, county level assessments. Youth mental health is one of the highest priority items, and we see that reflected here. And they even believe, our county commissioners believe, that we should also be focusing on youth mental health. Another one is rural development or rural economic development. So we see strengthening workforce readiness, and we see things like helping communities improve their quality of life. So we can see that rural development, mental health, and youth development now are becoming a more important part of what county commissioners think we should be doing. And when we look at strictly the county commissioners in urban and rural counties, they're still along these similar issues. So protecting water quality would continue to be an important issue. Local food system, agriculture, youth development, and air quality. The good thing is that we just had a new Air Quality Institute at USU. So these things are being addressed not necessarily through extension, but through the land grant university. And that's a good connection for us. So we see that agriculture remains an important issue, but at the same time, all those emerging things that we hear about today, like youth mental health, economic development, it's also being considered as part of extension's role in the state. So moving on to the next part, we wanted to get a good idea of their perception towards USU extension. And this is good news for us, because a lot of them agreed that extension aligned to the county goals. Again, a lot of the areas that USU extension focuses on are consistent with what they already do. So we're not competing against them in terms of offering something that they don't want, but we have similar strategic efforts. They also agreed that extension reach the population that they're supposed to reach. And this would continue to be an important issue, because as we look at reaching those historically underserved population, extension becomes more important there. And then a lot of them believe that extension had a positive impact in their county. We do work to prove that. Like, we do our newsletters, we have quarterly impact publication that we send out to them, and all of them have a printed copy of that, so they are aware of what extension does in the county. And then they also agreed, almost all of them agreed, that extension adds value to the county. Now, 70% said that extension provides the information they need to make decisions. Here, there's some room for improvement, because we now have to understand what they want from us when they're talking about return on investments. So this is an area that we're starting to focus on a bit more. It affects the quality of our evaluations, the evaluation methods that we use, and these are the discussions that we're having. Now, talking about the familiarity with extension, 50% were very familiar with extension, and 43% was somewhat familiar with extension. One of the things that you see after you collect data is, and you think to yourself, you should have asked that question, was the age of the respondents, because that would impact the distribution of familiarity. And in this study, we didn't do that. But as I said, this group of people, they're transitioning in and out of this group. So as it stands in 2021, most of them were familiar with extension, but 43% were only somewhat as unfamiliar. And we can assume that 43% are the younger group of county commissioners. And somewhat is unfamiliar in terms of an ordinal scale is much different from very familiar, because historically, extension had a very close relationship with county officials. And every single county official, let's say 20 years ago, knew what extension was. It was that organization that provided agricultural service. Now we see that change, right? 43% versus 50% is 53%. And when you're responding to a question like this, the distinction between very and somewhat is huge. Even though it's 1 point on an ordinal scale, that perception to respond to those two different things are much different. So this is one result that we need to take carefully, because we need to understand who are the people that are coming in to these roles, because they're the people that's going to fund us in the future. What are the background and what are they looking for from extension? If they start asking the question, why fund a redundant organization if we're already doing these things, then we'll have a hard time justifying our space in that office. So these are the things that we now need to think about moving forward in extension. And it has to do a lot with how we conduct our evaluation, what we report on, and what we can show to prove the value of extension programs. Right? This is why the last slide was important. We understand that the familiarity towards extension is shifting, right? Now we have, in this study, we also wanted to know what are the information they want from us. They want from us. So one of the big evaluation methods is utilization, is focused evaluation, meaning that we should be able to report what our stakeholders want from us. We go one step above that all the time, but we should understand the core indicators they are interested in and report on those core indicators. So from a basic evaluation standpoint, we know about the long-term outcomes associated with social, economic, environmental. Those long-term things that we focus on when we're planning a program. Now, from the perception of our county commissioners, they look at three things in Utah: health and well-being of residents, the economic benefits of extension programs, and participants' numbers. Now, participant numbers is an output, but it also aligns to who we are serving. So our target audience, our actual audience in terms of program coverage. Are we reaching the people that we're supposed to reach? Are we reaching the people that we never served before? So everyone benefiting from these services. Now, the other two things, the economic benefits, relate to the things like workforce development, things like rural unemployment, all those different things that we see are becoming an important issue. And then health and well-being, we can tie that directly back to mental health. So these are the three things that they're looking for that works well together. You have to be able to show program coverage and show that the people who are attending these programs are is benefiting from it in terms of some sort of economic benefit or health and well-being. And these are the things that we need to start framing our evaluation on and being able to show the evidence that we're making a real difference on these indicators.
Great. Thank you, Lendel. So now we'll go into some of the results from the qualitative evaluation. So like was mentioned, we did the primary surveying, and then we offered the opportunity to those who were willing to participate in a verbal interview. It was during COVID time, so we recorded everything via Zoom, and then we had graduate students who were willing to sift through all of the recordings and the transcripts and code the information for us so that we could better understand the issues and concerns, expectations, perceptions, and the similar data here. So what I've done on these next few slides is actually pulled out the summary from the reports that they've shared, and I'll just hit on a few things here. I was actually one of the people that was able to participate in the interviews. So I did probably about half of the interviews myself. And it was really interesting and eye-opening and actually very beneficial for my relationship with elected officials to be the one doing it. But one of the biggest trends and themes that we heard was about water. And that makes sense, where one of the top needs they listed in both overall and for our urban areas was assisting farmers, but it was water, 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 and drought. And that's just such a huge issue in our state. And, we do so much work around water and drought and resources for drought and helping farmers and homeowners through drought, but we don't always kind of pull all of that information together and speak about it in a way that might be connecting directly with people, where they're saying, oh, I see the work that you're doing is directly impacting the needs that I have. Many people talked about air quality, which was another interesting piece. Air quality in many of our urban counties is pretty poor, but in our rural counties, it's not as much of an issue, or it doesn't get talked about as much. And I was surprised that even in many, many of our rural counties, they brought up air quality as an issue and concern. And like Lendel said, we do have people working on that on a campus level at this point. I guess it's kind of jumping to discussion, but it's a great opportunity for us as Extension to say, we may not have someone in your county directly working on this, but there's people on campus who are working on this for the whole state, and we can help make sure there's resources in your area. There was a lot of concern about growth, traffic, and congestion, which goes to air quality issues, and affordable housing is also another big issue. When we asked them about the expectations of Extension, some of the things that I wanted to call out is they asked about providing transportation to office areas, or increased communication with the community and commission regarding available services. And what struck me on this is, gosh, providing transportation isn't really what we do. Maybe for some programs, for our 4-H programs, trying to get youth, but there were some unrealistic expectations that were shared with me as I was talking to them, and it made me definitely realize that we need to do a better job in communicating our role in communities and communicating, what we do versus kind of what's outside of our scope. But again, overall, they shared some good expectations and appreciation of what we do. When we asked about how we can better serve them, again, there was a few things that were kind of misperception. A participant expressed that having a physical location would help a greater chance to advance people's education. And we do have physical locations in every county. And I think this particular example was confusion between what we do as Extension versus what our statewide campuses do for higher education opportunities throughout the state. So ensuring that, we can better state that we are all USU and we're all providing services of USU, but we do have a physical location, but we're Extension doing community programs. Many also talked about USU to continue to get their name out there so we can be connected and involved with services already offered. This is something that I hear a lot. People will share that USU or Extension is the best kept secret, and that we need to do a better job of communicating and making sure that people know what we offer and what we do. The final slide here for the qualitative was just about kind of our any additional comments. And again, the commissioners talked about continued communication and outreach between Extension and the commission to be beneficial so we can address concerns and needs within the respective counties, which is exactly what Lendel and I were trying to do, pulling all of this information together. But I think what we found, and kind of a driver for all of this, is that many of maybe it's our county directors or our faculty members, you're not always quite sure how to communicate this and what commissioners want to hear and how often they want to hear from you, or what specifically to share with them, which is similar to what Lendel shared on the slide about health and wellness and the economic impact of what we do. Are we framing things in a way that hits those so that we are making those needs and the impact that we have a direct linkage between those two things, so the commissioners say, yes, I get it, I know what you're doing, you are important here, and you're valuable. So once we had all of this information pulled together, we said, okay, that's great. Now, what's the plan on what we're going to do with it? So part of my role, again, is working with all of our county directors in the state who do have the charge to work directly with their commissioners or council members in their specific county to build that relationship. That's where we get the funding for our county offices and programs. So we pulled together a summary for them and shared this information with our county directors. And we asked them then to go back and meet with their elected officials and discuss what they're seeing here, and discuss, how it resonates with them on an individual level. How does this apply specifically to their county? And then what's the possible next steps, or what do they need to do in order to better align the work that we do with the values and needs for the counties? As I took this back to my county, specifically here in Salt Lake, I pulled out the information and I said, here's the larger needs for the whole state. Let's talk about those. But then we also pulled out information specifically for urban communities and said, how does this fit? Because Salt Lake County is much more of an urban county, it's our most urban county. And so just making sure that we were looking at those needs and priorities specifically. And again, like Lendel mentioned, many times in those conversations, there were things that might have been outside of the scope of what Extension actually does in our programming areas. We are an educational organization, not necessarily service providers as far as mental health goes, or some of our larger issues and needs, or water quality. We're doing education around water quality, but we're not necessarily driving changes in our waterways right away. We're hoping that the education leads to that. But when there were big needs in the counties, that's when we did try to say, okay, but we are Utah State University, and there are resources and there are faculty members researching all of these things, and let's make sure that we can connect you with them, if there's things that it's outside of our scope to do. I think that this process, like I mentioned, it definitely gave me a stronger relationship with the elected officials by, having the communication with them to request that they participate in the study, and then having the one-on-one conversations with them definitely helped me have a stronger relationship, which I think strengthens our position overall, because they have a point of contact that's not necessarily in their county that they can reach out to with needs or concerns. Okay, so Lendel and I will both address this, but again, what we felt came out of this is a better understanding of what is needed so that we can allocate resources to programs that target these high priority issues. And I'd say we can allocate resources, and we can also request resources for programs that target high priority issues. This information has helped us as we approach counties during budget season to say, the reason that we're asking for this funding is because we've heard you've said this, we've heard our statewide community, they've said this. We have an opportunity to make a difference in this area, and so maybe we're requesting funding for these programs. It's ensuring that we're using data-driven approach to our program planning, which I'm sure many of you are experiencing as well as you're requesting funds or writing grants. We have to have the information, the data-driven approach to whatever we're doing. It helps us to tailor our evaluations to show impact on priority issues. An example of this for Utah is water. So are we all thinking about how we're evaluating our program so that we can collectively report on the impact that we're having on our drought and our lack of water in Utah? Also rationale for additional program support from other stakeholders. And it's great, we need to conduct ongoing assessment of emerging issues and perspectives of residents and stakeholders so we can match all of those things. Lendel, did you have more to add there?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do in extension really well is repeat the programs that we do over time, right? Things are changing, things have been changing, and extension has to respond to a whole lot of different complex issues. It requires us to be aware of what's happening. When we conduct our statewide needs assessment, youth needs assessment, this county commission assessment, it shows that we're keeping a pulse on what's happening and being able to show that we can respond to it shows our relevance. So it shows that we are in touch with what's happening, which shows that we can change. And it shows that extension is just not the agricultural organization it was. It's more than agriculture. It's rural development, it's economic development, and all those issues that impacts urban areas, suburban areas, rural areas. We've spent a lot of time and effort on understanding the needs so that we can respond to them. At the same time, we need to be able to show or to provide evidence that we're addressing those needs. We can have a discussion with our stakeholders and tell them that we're making a difference, but that no longer holds if the people that we're reporting to keeps changing. So we must now figure out a way to provide robust evidence of our impact. And that means changing the way we treat evaluation, changing the rigor of our evaluation methods. There would come a time where the only thing that speaks for extension would be data. And we need to understand that we go in that direction, or we keep being asked the same questions. Why should we fund extension when we can put this money to something else that has an observable impact? So it's up to us now to create data-driven programs and to provide evidence that we're addressing those issues.
And just a quick story with this. So we had a new council member in Salt Lake County last year. And as I presented my budget and was going through the budget process, this particular council member questioned it and decided to put the entire almost $1 million worth of funding for our county on the chopping block for the cut list. And one of his comments was, is this a new thing? Is this a new partnership? And luckily, because I had done my homework with all of the other council members, and because of kind of all of the things that have come out of this, we'd communicated all these things. They were very quick to tell him, no, USU Extension has value. They have a huge return on investment. They're aligning their programs with our needs. And luckily, because of that, our program was not cut, but it would have been a huge blow to us. And I expect that we'll probably come across issues like that in the future as demographics and things change. So are there any questions or anything that Lendel or I can share with you at this point?
Feel free to unmute your mics and
Yeah.
ask your questions directly, or if you prefer to type them in the chat, We'll narrate them for you.
A while back when I worked in the nonprofit world, someone told me once that if you ask for money, you'll get advice. And if you ask for advice, you'll maybe get money. And I kind of see that, that we need to understand what people want and listen to them for their advice. And it's definitely helped us with that. So we do have a question. Does Extension in Utah have any volunteer local advisory boards? Residents can give direct input to Extension offices, brings everyone together to better understand all the work Extension is able to do and not able to do. So we used to. We don't have formal advisory board requirements for our faculty members at this point. But we do say, yes, you need to have some sort of advisory boards and, some way that you are gathering the needs from the communities that you're working in, but that will look different from faculty member to faculty member and program to program. But we definitely have to have stakeholders' input and support. Lendel, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think, well, we encourage informal advisory boards now, so that when you're in a county, if you're faculty in a county, it's strongly encouraged to have an advisory board to plan your programs. Yeah.
Brent asked if this has resulted in an increase in funding to counties. And I would say I don't have data on that, but I can tell you it's been a rough couple of years and we have not had cuts. And that's big, that we have been able to maintain through some tough years. Let's see, do you collect data on viewing of the online report? Lendel, do you want to address that?
I'm not sure exactly, but so we have the Power BI reports, but we also do outcomes and impact quarterly, where we publish our impacts, and that goes out to all counties throughout the state at every issue. I can put the link here. So we make these things, we make our data that we collect for evaluation, for planning, for all of that, we make that as public and accessible as possible. And the link here is for one of those avenues.
And we do share, so it's a formal publication that we create into an email newsletter, and we do collect viewing of those reports online, and it's typically above a 50% open rate for those newsletters, and it's going to commissioners, council members, and the legislature. We don't have, and we have download of the formal report.
Yeah, and in outcomes and impact, I track the metrics for the amount of downloads, the amount of views. So we're able to get an idea of who is opening these things and where they're located.
Yeah, Julie, 50% is a good open rate. We were really happy with it. And it's maintained. So that's been really good too.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else having additional questions?
Lendel, how often would you suggest repeating this study?
I think we should do it so to be consistent with our statewide needs assessment, I think it should be every 4 years. So hopefully next year we can look into doing it again.
Mm-hmm. And I would, to be honest, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and maintaining the relationships with all of our stakeholders and elected officials across the state is a lot of work, but it's so important. I mean, we have to do it if we want to stay funded and stay relevant and be able to share, the amazing impacts of the work that we do and continue to have those impacts.
Right.
I think it provides a good opportunity to introduce ourselves to new county members too. So when we're collecting this data, we explain why we're doing this, who's extension, and all the different things that lets them know that we value their opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Juanita, did you have a comment?
Well, I was just sitting here thinking about a couple of things. One, partly because I've been around extension for so long, but I was thinking when you were talking about, new people and so on, how we used to didn't have to worry so much about this because our stakeholders in the decision-making positions, both at the county level and at the legislature, had grown up through our program one way or another. And now it's like, quote, a whole new ball game. And this is really a great model, I think, for collecting data and formalizing the communications, I guess I would say, to really get at these key issues. And it's an area that 30 or 40 years ago at Extension we didn't have to worry as much about or get into our program stream. But this is yeah. I've been on the extension committee in my county now for almost 30 years since I retired from extension. I thought I retired. I didn't really, I guess, just move jobs, but or responsibilities. But so I've kind of seen this evolve in our own committee and our own work over time too.
Yeah. So when I again started with Extension in 2015, I came from a small nonprofit world. And as I talked to people and they're like, oh yeah, we're fine. We've always been funded. I thought, holy moly, that sounds great. Because that wasn't the way it worked for me in the nonprofit world. It was like, you better demonstrate what you're doing or you're not going to get that new grant and that funding. And, some people have continued to roll on that. And it's scary when all of a sudden that's not the case anymore. And they say, wait a minute, why are we funding? So,
right.
Susan asked if there's a statewide association of county government officials, and there is, and I participate in those meetings every year. In the past, we used to just have an extension booth where we would say, we're extension, here's what we do. And in the past couple of years, we've really tried to say, no, we need to be much more involved and engaged and active and seek out county commissioners that we need to build stronger relationships with. I've given a couple presentations at the meetings themselves to help remind them who extension is. We take them chocolate from our chocolate factory to keep us on the forefront. But this is, Lendel mentioned, one of the strategic things that we did is we had a staff member who was a former county elected official. And so he and I worked very closely together because he had the previous relationships with many of the folks in our state that I didn't necessarily have. So he could get me in the door and then I could share the information about extension. And that I think was very helpful to have that trust already set up and the relationship.
Right.
Walter asked if we've considered evaluating state legislators, and that would be a great idea as well, because we're often promoting our programs there. Well, we're always promoting our programs there.
Right.
And then Brent asked, why the sample number of counties as opposed to all counties? Was it a capacity issue? So we tried to sample all counties. We just didn't get a response from one county. We weren't able to get anyone to do the survey in one of the counties.
Yeah, the goal was to get a census of respondents. We tried to get the entire population.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've put my email as well as Lendel's email on this last slide, so feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or thoughts or want any more information. We're happy to share the tools and questions and methods that we provided. So we really appreciate having the time today and being able to share this information with all of you. Tyrone, thanks for setting everything up.
Thank you so much, Andrea and Lendel. We appreciate you being willing to present today. Working with our stakeholders is what makes us successful in our communities, and I appreciated the information that you shared with us today. Our webinar was recorded. It'll be up on our website here. It may not happen until after the national conference. Usually it's about a week to turn it around, and with the national conference coming up on us, that may delay it a little bit. but you will get a reminder email from us that the webinar has been uploaded, and that will have the link to all of the webinars that you can view as well in our database system. Our next webinar is scheduled for November the 11th. The topic on it will be expanding your leadership potential and utilizing a cultural intelligence approach. That'll be led by Steve Brady from the Ohio Alpha Eta chapter. I believe I have seen that registration link already come out, but there'll be a few more emails
Came
as
this morning.
Okay, great. So we look forward to seeing you at our future webinars. They are scheduled on a second Monday monthly meeting from now until March. So be looking forward to those. Thank everyone for attending today. Hope to see you in Virginia Beach in 2 weeks for our national conference. Have a great day and a great week, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.